Hello everyone, my name is Julia. I am a certified Montessori teacher for elementary. I also have experience teaching in a Montessori middle school classroom, and currently I am teaching in an international baccalaureate high school program. I'm also a mom of a nearly 22-month-old named Isaac, and I'm a stepmom of a 9-year-old named Asher. Today's video is all about the Montessori Observation, and I have 5 tips to share with you as well on tools that you can use while observing your child. Before I begin, if you're new here, welcome, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever I post a new video. The concept of an adult observing a child in a Montessori environment is an extremely central part of Montessori philosophy and practice. So much so that during my Montessori training, we were told that upwards of 70% of our classroom time should aim just to be observation. Now, the way that I've described observation to parents or to other people who either don't quite understand what observation is, or who may look into a Montessori classroom and think that the adults inside are doing nothing but sitting down or nothing but hiding in a corner and not actively teaching, is that it's basically like being a scientist. The moment you decide to observe your child, or perhaps when an observation happens almost spontaneously, you are becoming a scientist, which means that you are being inquisitive, you are being curious, you are being conscientious of the impact of yourself in that environment, as well as conscientious of the impact of your presence, and you are being objective. And an observation period can happen not just during academic times or moments of very focused work. They can happen throughout the duration of your day and for many aspects of the day, including practical life, social emotional development, outside time, gross motor skills, and any sort of material or free play. My first tip is more is more, but less is more at the same time. What do I mean by that? I mean, the more you can observe your child or your children, the better. But you don't necessarily need to observe for any given amount of time or any minimum amount of time. An observation can be during a particular activity, saying eating a meal, or it can be during when your child is putting on their shoes or getting themselves ready in some way. You may be observing the same thing over a longer period of time, so doing continuous observations. But you don't need to feel that there's any amount of quantity or minimum number of times that you need to observe your child in order to best understand how they operate. Instead, when you do observe, make sure that you are going to be fully present in that observation as well. So this is the more is more. The more you are attentive and the more you are maximizing that 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 15 minutes of observation that you're doing, the more information you will be able to gather to better be able to support and offer things for your child in the future. My second tip is to be consciously immobile. And what this means is, again, going back to that scientist thing, if you are in the middle of nature and you catch a wild animal, you want to be able to observe them doing things naturally as if you weren't there. So making yourself as invisible and as immobile as possible by sitting on a chair, or by hanging out in a corner, or by choosing a blind spot from where your child is, will ensure that your child will be able to work uninterrupted and won't be distracted by your presence. However, at home, I've realized that conscious immobility is something that's not always achievable. In fact, oftentimes if my toddler or either of the kids are playing and I will go and sit on the couch quietly, or I will hover in a doorway to just watch them, they will notice that I'm there and then suddenly I'm needed. So at home, I also like to adopt kind of being consciously, peripherally, simultaneously occupied, which means I'm observing the kids while doing something that I don't need to be super mindful of. So if I'm washing dishes and Isaac is having a meal, I can observe him while I'm washing dishes. Or if I'm folding laundry and it's somewhere in the living room or it's somewhere in a different room, perhaps, that I can still see them and they're still in my peripheral vision, but I'm doing something at the same time, I find that tends to be more successful for me at home versus in a classroom where the immobile part of everything is a little bit easier to achieve. And my third tip is to take notes, whether they're mental notes or written notes. Depending on how many kids you have to observe or how you like to organize yourself personally, make sure that at the beginning of your observation and at the end of your observation, you are being conscious as to what exactly you're observing. And at the end of your observation, when you're note-taking from that, there are things that you want to avoid and there's things that are better to pinpoint. So avoid judgmental phrases from your observations such as, oh, my child never played with this, or my child disliked that, or my child got frustrated with this, or my child really likes this thing, or really likes doing that. Instead, try and be specific. Because remember, in a scientific observation, you collect data, and then from that data, you form your conclusions and you act accordingly. And remember also, Dr. Maria Montessori was a trained doctor. She was a scientist. This whole method and mindset of observations being like scientific studies almost is very much in line with her personal type of thinking. So at the end of it, try and take notes instead, like, my child played with this activity 3 times today, or my child threw a lot of rocks today, or my child repeated the same math question 6 times today. Again, it's that objectivity that you're aiming for. And my fourth tip is to choose what you are observing. Are you just observing one thing? Are you just observing a specific behavior or activity? Or are you observing a multitude of things? And from there, you are able to better pinpoint, or eventually you'll be able to see what you were looking for and be able to focus on whatever it is you are deciding on. My fifth tip for you today is to come away from your observation with the intention of acting upon the deductions that you make. For example, if you've been observing that your child is doing a lot of their eating standing up, perhaps from that deduction, your next step would be to set up an environment in which they can stand while eating, or to revisit the rules of eating that you had established once upon a time, if necessary. If you've been observing that your child has been ordering a lot of things by size, then perhaps a deduction you can make from that is, I've noticed that my child ordered all of their socks in rainbow order. I noticed then the child later on during the day ordered all of their block toys from biggest to smallest. So the deduction is that your child is perhaps entering a sensitive period to do with order, and the action that you can take in the future is to provide more opportunities to practice ordering and orderly placement of things. So that's all I'm going to share with you today. 4 observations. I've found at home that spontaneous observations seem to be the name of the game for me, that Isaac will busy himself doing something and I will busy myself doing something, and then eventually it'll get quiet and I'll just peek over and see what he's doing, or that there is a fierce or voracious desire in him to do something. Most of my observations with Asher tend to be either strictly academic or social emotional. So a lot of my observations with him tend to be a little bit more structured because it is when he's doing his home practices that I will be observing, or my husband will be observing him. So again, it depends on the ages of your child and where they're at and what you want to get out of it. But I hope that one of those tips has been helpful for you today, and please let me know if you have any questions down in the comments. I'm always happy to answer and chat. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll catch you next time.